Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming here tonight. This is the third and last event that Edith and I have put together for launching our book that you see right here. And all the gentlemen, but one of them here, featured in here. So I just got some of them to sign my book. This is a great opportunity if you happen to have a copy to get these gentlemen to sign it for you. One person that couldn't be here tonight, and we have to acknowledge our good friend and co-author, John Warner. As you know, he was killed in an auto accident, and he was killed just as we were wrapping up our first draft. My speaking is going to be very short because I want to save as much time as possible for the real interesting people in this room. This is an extraordinary opportunity. I hope you all realize that. But to have, 4 Vietnam helicopter pilots here with us and 2 veterans is really an extraordinary opportunity. You get to ask them any question you want. This book here is a continuation of that aviation exhibit. I hope some of you will remember it, but we did it at the H.C. Moore Homestead in Clinton. And in that exhibit, we featured something like 13 or 14 pilots. But we interviewed so many people, so many more pilots, that we thought we would make a book to include all the stories that we gathered during that exhibit. I'm going to talk very briefly about the causes of the Vietnam War. I think it's important to remind people why it happened. What you're looking at here is a map of the big colonies before World War II, the colonial empires. And you can see, for example, that Great Britain is in this dark pink, and you can see that they have colonies all over, of course, Canada, all over Africa and the Middle East, Asia, and Australia, and they're definitely the biggest colonial power at the time. And even the United States, by the way, had colonies in Cuba, and they had the Philippines also. Even small countries like Belgium, for example, right here, had a great big chunk of Africa. It was a time when people started to realize that they couldn't just get by with the things that they could make themselves and procure locally, but in order to prosper, a country needed a good supply of rubber, needed copper, even things like coffee and bananas and all those different commodities. So it was a mad rush to secure big portions of what they considered to be undeveloped world. The one empire that interests us the most tonight is France. As you'll see, they had a lot of colonies in North Africa, but also they had what they used to refer to as Indochina, which was Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Now, in World War II, France got quickly defeated by Germany. So, of course, they lost control of their colonies over there in Indochina, and the Japanese took advantage of to just jump in and take control of it. Now, 4 years later, Japan loses the war. They pull out of there, and it creates a vacuum, a power vacuum in there. And the Ho Chi Minh and his Communist Party takes advantage of this power vacuum to take control of Vietnam and declare Vietnam's independence. The French are not happy with that, and of course they sent troops over there to try to retake their colony and have the Indochina War. 1946 to 1954, 8 years of war. And this should have been a warning to the Americans before they entered Vietnam, because it's an enormously costly war. At first, the French thought they could just go in there with a few thousand troops. It was just a matter of capturing the capital, and everything would get back to normal. Eventually, they got embroiled into larger and larger operations. And in the end, France deployed 470,000 soldiers, and 77,000 of them died. That's absolutely enormous. That's almost 16%, if my math is right. To give you a frame of reference, do you know what percentage of Americans died in World War II? Anybody know? For every 100 Americans deployed to World War II, how many of them died? It's 1.5%. 1.5%. They suffered 15%. The French finally surrendered even after committing all these troops. Numbers that are even more frightening is the Viet Minh deployed 700,000 people, and they lost 250,000. Absolutely astounding number, more than a third, 1 out of 3 of their soldiers. And still they went on. They just didn't quit, and they won the war. You can draw a lot of similarities between the Indochina War and the Vietnam War that was kept. That happened later. The end of the Indochina War, the French surrendered, and it was decided that Vietnam would be cut in half temporarily. The north would be controlled by the Viet Minh and Ho Chi Minh, and the south Vietnamese was backed up by the Americans and the Australians. It didn't work out. They were supposed to organize nationwide elections to determine the system of government, the political party in charge. But as you might imagine, they never could quite agree on the detail. It degenerated into the Vietnam War. The North being backed up by China and the Soviet Union, the South being backed up by NATO, essentially, and the Americans. A few more numbers about the Vietnam War. I think these numbers say a lot about the war. There were 2,709,918 Americans that served in the Vietnam War. The peak presence was 543,000 in 1969. You remember the French had something like 500,000 or something like that. The Americans had 5 times more people. The North Vietnamese suffered 750,000 deaths. The South Vietnamese, including the Americans, suffered 350,000 deaths. The Americans suffered 58,281 deaths, which amounts to, that is an enormous number by any standards. It amounts to 2%, which is actually more than the deaths that were suffered during World War II. And of course, the Vietnamese civilian death came to about 1 million. Because we're going to talk mostly about helicopter pilots here and the air war in Vietnam. A few more figures for you. 12,000 to 15,000 U.S. helicopters were deployed during the war. 5,600 helicopters were lost. It's almost half of them, which is an unbelievable number. 45,000 to 50,000 American helicopter pilots and crews served in Vietnam. 3,450 of them died. And that is 7.3%. Again, a mind-boggling number. It was quite dangerous to fly helicopters in Vietnam. And you might wonder, by the way, 45 to 50, why don't we have a figure? Didn't they keep track? But there's so many, in fact, they kept very important figures and records. They really recorded missions more so than the men that served them. And depending by the method you use to count them, for example, there were a lot of helicopter pilots, and maybe some of you that served several tours, and they might have been counted as a new pilot each time they started the tour. Another quick figure that I think is mind-boggling, the UH-1 Huey, which is the helicopter that you can see one there, a really iconic helicopter of the Vietnam War, flew over 7.5 million hours, which amounts to 855 years of day and night, 24 hours a day. These are just the main helicopters. I'm not going to spend any time, but I thought maybe some of the guests on our panel might want to refer to some of these images. Now, I was hoping that each one of you would introduce yourself And your photo is going to come up here, and I have a few photos of these gentlemen in service, and maybe they can elaborate a little bit about these photos. Skip?
Yeah.
You recognize him now? Skip Armstrong?
I don't recall where this is taken. The other fellow there is Al Shaw's. And he was CW2 warrant officer. And I think he was from Pennsylvania.
Chick Harrington.
This picture was taken at John Warner's house. Blind village over there. All of them.
These photos are photos I think that you took, or do you recognize this image?
Me, I might have taken that.
I think you have.
Well, I didn't pay a lot of attention.
Maybe you can talk about that particular helicopter there?
Okay, I can't see the number on it.
It's a Cobra.
Yeah, our unit had Cobras, Scouts, 086s, and Hueys. Those are called revetments, where we park them that way when the bad guys lob bombs in there. You wouldn't lose a lot of helicopters. The next day we'd get a new one.
It's another photo from you.
Yeah, I took that picture. That picture was taken up not far from where Phil was, with LZ uplift and the fire base. That is a wing scout because he's got the mini down on the west side. It was blurred, I think.
This is what you call a loach, right?
Yeah, light observation helicopter pushing together, it says Loach.
One more photo of you.
Well, that's me in New Guinea. Nobody was shooting there, was there?
David Henard.
Well, that's a young guy. Well, that was right after I finished flight school. Obviously, I got my wings. But I think they required all of the officers to have a picture taken. But all I can say, that's the signal corps you see on my pedals and the wings. And at that point, I just had the national defense ribbon like everybody else got.
A few more photos of you, David.
Well, that was my go-to pilots.
You right here?
That's me there in May of '68. Actually, the May offensive was the most serious of the three as far as our unit was concerned, because we lost several pilots. So our teams, we ended up with 2 teams instead of 3, so we were on duty about all the time. But these guys, I'm the old man in there. I'm 24, and these warrant officers were usually around 21 or 22. Those guys were all good pilots. The one with his arms crossed, you might imagine, he was a little cocky and stubborn. And I tried to break him over flying the target, and he never would quit. And he finally took a round in the knee with a steel jacket at 7.62 millimeters, so that was the end of his tour. So that was a time when I was not running the Diamond Ed 10 team, and that's what our call sign was. And behind there is one of our hogs. We affectionately call it a hog because it was so heavy. You actually couldn't hover the thing with 48 rockets. You just I'd have to hop it out to the airstrip, which is bleed RPM as soon as I pulled pitch. Each of the rockets, the heads were, or the armor part was 10 or 17 pounds, and the motor, I don't know what it was, around 20 maybe. But anyway, when you got 38 or 48 of them, it's heavily loaded. And we had 4 gunner and crew chiefs, so a crew of 4. And even though we were more skinny back then, That's still a lot of weight.
And a few more photos that you contributed.
Yeah, that was a accident, obviously. I think that happened because a flare lit inside the cab in the back. And we dropped a lot of parachute flares, and that's what that mission was there. I wasn't flying that one, thank goodness. But it burned it, crashed. There, well,
The same aircraft.
either the same or I was wrong about the other one. That's definitely the flare, because you can see the fire extinguisher residue there. So.
Harry Olson. We have two panelists here that are not helicopter pilots, but we thought it'd be great to include their perspective from the ground or from the ground crew.
This was very early in the Vietnam War. I actually was stationed in Tachikawa, Japan, to start out with, and I was an aircraft mechanic. And this is standing on the wing of a C-124. There's where we were changing an engine on it, and it was the 1503rd Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, and we supported flights to and from Korea every day. We had 25 of these C-124s in our unit, and I was actually in what they call transit maintenance, and I did very little work on the planes that were stationed there. My job was to turn around planes that came in from the States, actually C-124s, C-118s, C-97s, and C-121. So I was actually working on 4 different types of aircraft.
Nelson Thorp. That's the only photo I have of you, Nelson.
Okay, I know where you took that. So that's the day I graduated from OCS as an infantry officer on the ground. And I'm a pilot, but I didn't fly helicopters in Vietnam. I flew in them. So I ended up in Vietnam a year after this picture. My wife and I went to Fort Hood, Texas first. But then we got my orders to Vietnam, went over there, assigned to the 101st Airborne. And I said, why? I'm not jump qualified. They said, you don't have to jump, you just rappel out of the helicopters. Oh my God. Yeah, well, that was a new one, but we did, yeah. They give you a 100-foot of rope and a pair of gloves. And you make your own saddle. If it come untied, tough. Well, that's what we did. I probably flew in helicopters of the 10 months I was over there, 9.5. I mean, almost every day. I ended up in forward supply. So we had Hueys coming to us all the time. Chinooks all the time were with us. 2 Chinook crews saved my tail. Okay? They came in and got us when nobody else would. So I really commend these guys that were flying those helicopters over there. On a regular resupply day, we would go from sea level to 6,000 feet. We had guys that would lose, they couldn't hover because of the density altitude. So we had to supply these guys on the mountain. They took the skids off, trying to get in. Came back with one just hanging like this. Called me on the radio, says, we'll be back after we get another one. Those guys we flew into the trees one time and I was in one, but an hour later, we had another chopper, just kept on flying. Those guys never gave up on me. Anytime we needed them. Now my big story, and I'll quit, is that I was injured one night. We were supposed to be getting hit on a fire base. So my platoon was to resupply the whole bunker. There was 100 and some guys there, ammunition that night. It was raining. Okay, anybody in the military know what the mules are? You got 4 wheels, not 4 legs. Okay, I was driving one of them, it slid on the mud, dumped over on top of me with about 1,000 pounds of ammunition, M16 and M60 ammunition. The mud's what saved me, because I was buried in the mud. My guys came and got me. They tried to medevac me. Some more helicopters were involved. But nobody, the medevacs wouldn't fly. A one-star general was flying his own chopper, and I don't know how that even occurred. He landed on the helipad and said, I'm taking that lieutenant to Fubai, to the hospital, the MASH hospital. He slid me in by his radios, and he did the flying. I know we did an instrument approach. We landed. He had put his coat on top of me, by the way, because I wasn't feeling too good. They slid me off into a gurney. There was 2 doctors and 4 nurses. They pulled the coat off and saw my dog tags and said, he's just a lieutenant. And no joke, all I had left was 2 nurses. Okay, I'll shut up.
Phil Rybolt. Well, that picture actually, when I was in the National Guard. So, I don't know what we were flying somewhere. I don't remember where it was taken. There were a few more. Yeah, I got a feeling, yeah, that's a National Guard picture too. Kind of looks like it might have been around summer camp sometime, buildings in the back. That was after the Vietnam War? Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, all the National Guard was after. But this one, that was in Vietnam. And so, usually when you got to our unit, we had Hueys and H-13s, Scout helicopter. That was the forerunner of the Luch. That had a piston engine in it, 6-cylinder, and it wouldn't go as fast, and single machine gun. We had an observer gunner that we carried, and basically it's a 2-person helicopter. It was always low level. You can see behind the top of my hat there, that's a fuel tank. It had a fuel tank made out of metal, and there was a fuel tank on each side of the engine. So whenever you crashed, it usually fell on the hot engine, or, you know, they almost always burned if you went in very hard. So, anyway, those were days. Is that another photo of you? That was a palm tree, which is up near the DMZ. It was after Tet Offensive. That was my second Distinguished Flying Cross. And, some general, awarded it, and I just came back from the mission, and they said the general's here to do this. And anyway, everybody had a steel pot on. Well, scout pilots always carried a soft hat, but there was no place to have a steel pot in an H-13 because it didn't have any doors on it. Anyway, the maintenance officer had a steel pot and gave it to me, and I had to tilt it back so it wasn't over my eyes. So from here on, this is all of you folks. You get a chance to ask any of these gentlemen some questions. To get the ball rolling here, I have prepared a few questions. I'm going to pass them around and ask you to draw. We'll start with you, Phil. So just grab the hat. Oh. And feel free, if you don't want to answer the question, that's fine. Or if you want to ask some other gentleman to take the question, that's fine too.
Sounds and smells. The question is, are there sounds and or smells from the Vietnam War that are still vivid in your mind. I can't really think of any. My one thing, I don't see my cousin here, but after Vietnam, he came and picked me up at the farm just to drive somewhere, and we were rolling the window down, I don't know what liner is, and the window cracked like that, just like a bullet coming through the aircraft. And that's about the only thing I can remember.
Did you have honey pots up where you were?
Honey pots.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Kerosene.
but I was raised on a farm.
Okay. There's a difference.
Yeah, what he's talking about is, you know, the bathrooms in our area, like first cab, we always lived in tents. And so you have to go to the bathroom. So there's always outdoor outhouses. Most of them didn't have much around them, but, you know, but anyway, so that needs to be taken care of. And so every day they pour diesel fuel or jet fuel in them, lit them on fire, and they were burning. It smells terrible. But didn't impact me that way.
Any other members here can answer that question maybe?
Well, I didn't pay any attention to it. I wasn't paying attention. Yeah.
I think one of the sounds now that recall, and you know, I'm always looking, I can hear a Huey or a helicopter
Can you guys hear
flying
back?
around.
Yep.
Yeah, it's still, a Huey is still very distinctive in its prop noise. And if you see any sprayers around here, you know whether they're a Loesch or not because of the way they sound. Because they got 4 blades and they sound different. Still remember that. And I told Dennis this, when I got off the airplane in Vietnam, it smelled like a wet basement. And I think I smelled like a wet basement when I came home. So that was wet and damp. It just always smelled that way.
Well, that Huey sound in part was the weighted tip on the rotor blade, and it would break the sound barrier. So that was the pop, pop, pop sound.
And we knew the difference between that Chinook.
Yeah.
And we even had the 54s flying for us for a while. They were bringing us bulldozers and backhoes.
This guy wants to ask a question.
Yes, please.
Yes, the thing I remember was the open sewage. First smell that hit me when I stepped off the plane.
Is that when you first landed in Vietnam?
Yes. Especially when we arrived, I can't remember the name of the place now. But it was just, it took me, that's one thing I'll never forget.
I've interviewed a lot of Vietnam veterans, and a lot of them have told me that there was a smell to Vietnam. I was speaking to Gary earlier. You were saying that there was a particular food smell. Is that right?
Now, if you went to a carnival or a state fair, and where the vendors was cooking, and you went around there, even though you couldn't see the cooking, the smell was still in there, and that's what it smelled like to me. It wasn't an offensive smell, but it wasn't a pleasant smell. But that's what it smelled like. So just go to the Illinois State Fair this year, to that, and take a great big breath. That's what Vietnam smelled like.
The other smell was the fatigues that we wore, because the hooch maids did our laundry. They'd go out to the river and clean, so to speak, our fatigues, but the rivers were not clean. The water was part of the same kind of stuff. So, well, we wore them. Didn't have any choice.
Phil, if you could pass the hat to your right. And by the way, feel free to, if you have any kind of questions that comes up in your mind, yes.
Yeah, being from Fort Worth, Texas, have any of you guys flew one of your Hueys to the parking lot of housing to pick up your lunch? And do you still, when you hear a helicopter, do you find the sounds of which, if it's a regular civilian copter, or you look up immediately when you detect it's a military copter? Because I have the instinct a lot, being down at Fort Hood 3 times with my husband. And the reason why I asked about the picking up lunch, one of our neighbors, my girlfriend's husband, he would fly his Huey into the center of the housing parking lot and land, run in and get his lunch, and go back to work.
I'm sure we never did anything like that.
My question is, did you have a good luck charm or ritual before flying? I thought I was bulletproof. I didn't think anybody was going to get me. That was maybe my charm, I don't know.
Anybody else? Did you have a good luck charm or some ritual?
Dog tags. Had one of those.
Did you feel that what do you mean by your dog tags were your
Well,
lucky charm?
No, that's got your blood tied. That's so
Oh.
they can identify you if you're killed or crashed. All soldiers wore them.
Well, I have to make a comment again, but when we were over there and our unit decided that if they, now this is maybe a little blunt, if they shot you in the head, they couldn't tell who you were. If they shot you in the foot, you could talk to them. So you put one dog tag around your neck and one in your boot. That's way warm over there.
Kip?
Were there moments you found unexpectedly funny, even in the middle of war? I don't recall any.
Well, I have one. My Diamond Head 10 team was on duty, and my favorite wingman was flying the OH-23 that we had to take the artillery officers around to Giao Chang and Tainan and back to Cu Chi. And my wingman was receiving fire, so we got scrambled by division headquarters up there to find out what was going on. And there was a down fast mover. I don't know if it was a F-4 Phantom or what, but they had been dropping bombs in the area. But people were coming out of the woods, and my wingman said they're VC. I said, well, I don't see any weapons. He said they look like forced laborers to me. So we rounded them up, sort of, and my door gunners were good at getting the young guys that were going to break away back in line. We marched them all the way down to an old abandoned airfield right below Nui Ba Den, the 3,000-foot volcano right in the middle of 30 foot above sea level, rice paddies and triple canopy jungle. But anyway, we were running low on fuel by the time we got them to the airfield, so I sent my wingman on to Tainan to refuel, and we parked right alongside of these Vietnamese people, and my door gunner was getting hot because we were just sitting there motionless, and so he takes his helmet off and sets it on the seat beside him, and I'm watching, and this guy had a hat on, and a lady next to him whacked him a couple of times. Must have told him to take his hat off, so he did. She she thought they better be cordial with us. But then another old gal that looked like Park Wolverine, she had a scowl on her face, and she relieved herself right in front of us. So, no respect after all.
Okay, well, the one I pulled out, I wasn't flying, but can you account for the first time you took enemy fire? And I don't remember the first time. It just seemed like it happened a lot. We were infantry. We were search and destroy. We were platoon size out. When I first got there, the sign of the mortars. So these are 81 mortars, not the 4.2. All you military guys, it's 81s. 3 guns at a unit, right? And I had 16 guns. I think it was 70 people. And I'm a second lieutenant. Holy cow, what am I doing here? And every night we were firing in defensive targets for the platoons in our battalion. And they would never get the fire direction center. They were always trying for the guns. So we never directly took it. And then, oh geez, we got hit. And this wasn't the first time though. That day we got beat up pretty bad. We were just 2 miles from DMZ on a hill. We took off the wrong way in the helicopters. We were in North Vietnam. They jumped us at 10 o'clock in the morning. The helicopter pilot actually heard it coming. I swore he saw the puff. He took off. It landed. Connexes saved us from the first shrapnel. 4 people killed. We had 7 people wounded. And we couldn't fire back because there was an agreement with the village. The village chief had to approve it. For the region of Vietnam we were in, we couldn't fire back for 20 minutes. And then that noise starts coming back to me. And I ended up being, I was a first lieutenant then, but there was no other higher officer on the hill that day. So I just called everything that would start coming to us. And so we got artillery to fire for us, but they couldn't reach us. Artillery had already left our hill. Then we got, I think they came from Thailand, F-4s, the Air Force showed up. And they called in, a FAC came in, and he started, we found them, we thought. And we blew about 2 feet off the hill, and we used napalm to finish it off. And we didn't sleep for about 3 more days. That same one, we had sappers come into us one night, and everything opened up. Everything, I swear every weapon on that fire base opened up. And you didn't have, now we were supposed to have ear protection too, right? So that many weapons, all the way from the 105s and 44 caliber were firing for us. 100 M16s. Nobody could hear for about 15 minutes after that. And we missed the guy. We couldn't find him. We knew he was there. 2 guys saw him. He crawled through the wire and tripped a flare. So anyway, that one really comes back to that wasn't the first time. But then
Pass the hat back this way.
later on.
You have any questions you want to add? No? Yes?
Yeah, there is a notable scene. I don't know, some of you have probably seen the movie We Were Soldiers, Young and Once or something like that. It portrays one of the major battles early on in Vietnam, where a group of Huey gunships basically turned the battle towards the American side. I was just curious, the Huey being as vulnerable as what it was, did it have much of a role in terms of actually being a significant part of offensive operations in Vietnam?
I think it had a huge role. My mission was close air support for the ground units, and we would receive a scramble call from the division headquarters. They triaged the most serious firefight at the time and would scramble us with a call sign, a frequency, and a set of coordinates. And we would fly to it as quickly as we could. The reason that helicopters were so important was that we could fire much closer to our friendly troops without endangering them than Navy jets or napalm, any of the other HE type of bombs that they could drop. And in fact, I had one mission where we had to help this lurk patrol that was surrounded by Viet Cong and enemy troops. Usually I made my runs from about 1,200 feet and I'd break about 600. When I say break, we were in a dive, firing usually 3 or 4 pairs of rockets on the way. We would break off. That's when we were at our most vulnerable point because they could see the belly of the aircraft. But I had 2 rules to bring my crews home and to avoid hurting friendlies. And one I mentioned earlier was to never overfly the target. My wingman would fire a pair of rockets right beneath us at the break. That's what I told them to do, and they were good at doing that. But I tried to make our missions as boring as possible. I never got bored, as I recall, but I wanted to bring our guys home, my crew home. I wanted to avoid hitting any friendly troops, and I forgot the other one. Accomplished the mission, which is drilled into you as an officer. So, yeah, it wasn't reported nearly enough in the news, but armed helicopters had a tremendous effect. In fact, in the one battle where a wingman from another unit broke off and left me, and it's in the book, in the little book we got here, but the lieutenant colonel gave me credit for helping win the battle. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is for anyone. When you all arrived back in the United States and you were finished at Vietnam, how were you received? Did you feel welcome to, was friendly, not your families, but just in general? What was it like?
Pretty bad, right, guys?
It's not like but it's not like now, that people thank you and do that. But they left us alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't have much time for it.
Yeah.
Back to the rule of gunships. These 3 guys are gun pilots. We're gun pilots. I was a slick driver. My slick driver, I was the one down going into the landing zone, the troops getting off them. And these guys prepped the area and then they protected us.
If it wasn't for the helicopters, we couldn't have done anything. They moved us, they moved our equipment, they pulled us out of there when we were hurt. They pulled some of the long-range guys, the patrols out by rope. Instead of rappelling in, they would pull them out with harnesses. We had the Air Force. What's the big one that the Air Force was flying? The 55 or 54? They would basically able to do a radar approach to a position and pick you up. Then lower a basket down through the jungle, pull you out of there.
I picked up 4 or 5 SEALs, Navy SEAls in an area near the Cambodian border. We didn't have, well, we just had a cargo deck. And log and lead, about 200 foot of line. We threw the net out with that line on it. They climbed into that with their legs out through the holes. It's not a safe thing, they don't allow that, but the thing is, they didn't have a choice, so they climbed in, and I just went vertical, got them out of there, and I headed back to a place called Kantu. And they flew stable at 80 knots, so I'm booking along at 80 knots, and I put you 200 foot in the air and below you, and they're swinging around. They weren't. Anyway, I got the pontoon, it's a, we call perforated steel planking runway. And they, it wasn't a small runway, but at 200 feet, you think you've stopped, but you really haven't. You're still moving forward. And these poor guys, they're hanging out there at 200 feet, and my crew chief said, well, you're 10 feet off the ground. He's leaning out watching this, you know. He said, well, it's 5 feet. He says, now they're running. And he says, now you're dragging them. And so these were Navy SEALs. I mean, they're serious guys. And so, you know, I got it down and got it stopped, and I took it over to the side, and you have to do a 2-minute cool down. And so this one SEAL comes walking over, stumbled, you know, limping over, right? And I said, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. You know? And he was going to punch me or something. But he comes over and shakes my hand. He was so happy to have gotten out of there. He didn't complain at all. You know? Yeah, but I remember that crew chief said, well, now you're dragging it.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, just a comment. I was an infantry soldier on the ground, so I appreciate the helicopter more than you'll ever know. Come to find out, Dave Thorp there was with the Little Bear unit. He flew in sport, so I'm sure he saved my butt many a time.
That was our job, and we liked it. Describe a moment, are we ready for those?
Yes.
Describe a moment when your training saved your life. Well, actually, when I flew the Cessna 150, which is the reason I signed up for advanced ROTC, we had some great instructor pilots there outside of Raleigh, about 10 miles. Vichy Airfield, it's called. And we got some bush pilot, or one bush pilot from Alaska was one of my instructors. He taught me how to do amazing short field landings. It almost looked like a helicopter, you know. But the one thing that he didn't teach me, which I used in Vietnam and saved my life and a whole other crew, was how to spiral down through a hole in the fog. We were up at night, and in Vietnam, the dew point can change very quickly, and it can go from clear skies to fog everywhere. And that's what happened to me. So my first thought was to fly up to Tain Inn, where they were supposed to have radar. They have radar, but it never worked, unfortunately. So I was too far from Saigon to radio them, so I flew south towards Saigon, and the tower said, well, we can help you, but it's going to be an hour because we're stacked up. And I didn't have an hour of fuel left, and about that time, one of the Little Bears that was up there too, he'd been in the air 15 minutes before me, so he was really starting to panic. But I don't know why, but I flew over toward Benoit, which is fairly close to Saigon, and right over the airfield there was a hole. I could see the lights down there, so I radioed him and said, I'm going in. And I used that spiral and put it in the refuel area, and we were sitting there, and I was just relaxing in the right seat. And he walks over out at his chopper. Oh, I'm sorry, I left out a big part of it. He said, I lost the hole. And I said, well, just a minute, I'll shine my landing light up through it. So I did that. He said, he's got it. So he came on down, and he walked over and motioned me to get down, and I did. And he gave me a big bear hug. So that was worth the effort. I was going to save him anyway, of course.
Anybody else want to take that question? Do you remember an instance when your training saved your life?
No.
I don't, a lot of the things you learned there weren't in the training. I mean, that was basically when they, like when I was flying scouts, the UE pilots, you know, in the unit, they said the scouts would get, the scout pilot would get nosebleed from high altitude if you got 25 feet above the trees.
Oh, no.
Because we were always in the trees, and they never trained you in Fort Rucker to fly, you know, at treetop level everywhere.
500 hours, 6 months, twice shot down. That was the scout tour. The scout pilot.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't have that.
Any questions? Yes?
I'd just like to ask if I could, how old each of you were when you entered the service?
I was 19.
Oh, when we entered?
Yeah.
I was 19.
I was 24 when I was in the Army.
I was
21.
21. I was 22.
23. You pass the hat back over here to Larry.
I have a question. What do you guys, I know that they had the draft for Vietnam. And I know the results of how people dealt with that. They either left the country or went into politics or went. And when they fixed it to where there was no draft, then they come up with the selective draft. How do you guys feel about that? Because it's still a draft, and it comes up a draft. The only benefit they got is decide what branch they're going into. It's still a draft. And I was kind of curious, knowing how the draft was back then and how it is now with this selective draft, which I hope they never have to bring in the draft again. I know what that was like. But having kids of your own or whatever, I see a lot of people are still divided like they were back then. If when it came time for their kids to sign up for the selective draft, when they turned 18, I don't know if they figured we'll move out of state and they won't find us. It's the whole nation. And I don't know a friend of mine, son, ever went in for selective draft. But I was, I don't know how it affected you guys with the draft, but I mean, I was in 6th grade when everything went down, and it just, I learned a lot from the news, and I learned a lot from just what was going on in the country about it. And I think at that time, I thought it wasn't right for them to force somebody to go in. If they wanted to go in, that was fine. When we had Iraq, people volunteered. When the time came that we needed to go over. And we were over in Germany when the storm came. And we were in a bad spot as it was, but some of the soldiers just kind of lost track of what they were about, what their job was about.
Did all of you get drafted, or did you volunteer?
All volunteers in Vietnam were drafted.
I got notice that, well, I was about to get drafted. And Phil had died, I heard Phil did this deal, and I said, that's better than being in the infantry. So I went and took the test, and I passed it. And that's how I got to be a helicopter. You can say I volunteered, but it was sort of like.
Well, that was a motivator.
Yeah.
I had my draft notice. I mean, same way you volunteer, but, you know, you had your draft notice to go through the paperwork.
Well, and I know.
Can we let them answer? We gotta keep.
When my husband went to that storm, I stayed over in Germany, worked under headquarters at Friendly Assistance to help take care of the veterans. Fortunately, I'm still military ID connected, active duty deceased. And I was acknowledged as a veteran for working as a volunteer by headquarters and Pentagon. But I actually talked to my kids. We had 6 kids, 1 boy and 5 girls. Our oldest daughter joined the Marines after she got out of school. And my son ended up going into the Guard and went straight from boot camp to Afghanistan. So
You have a question?
Yeah,
You want to read
made
the
a
question?
difference with the kids on how to make that decision.
Now, the question I got was, how did you deal with losing friends or crew members? Well, when I was in, the only people that were, the U.S. people that were in Vietnam were advisors. So I was not actually in the Vietnam War, I was in the Vietnam War era. But I did, I was also crewing a C-133 that came in from Travis Air Force Base in California. And my job was to turn it around and get it ready to go back. And so when the crew came out, I was there to guide it out of the parking spot and get them out to the runway. Well, about 2 hours after they left, we got a notice back that they went down in the Pacific Ocean. So we flew missions for, I think we took out 18 of our station aircraft with people on board. They had jump doors in the back of the C-124s, and we had a person in each one of them, plus the crew looking out the windows, trying to find them. We did finally see some floating seats, but never found out anything. So actually about 2 months later, found out that it was a high wing aircraft, that one of the wings, they had a stress fracture in it, and the wing actually broke off when it went down. So they grounded all of those, and very few of them ever flew again. So it was, it's kind of really stays with you for quite some time to talk to those crew members as they're leaving and never made it back.
I lost 2 members out of my flight class, and one of them was my best friend, and it still has an effect on me. The guys in Vietnam we flew with the same pilots a lot, but we took whatever aircraft was flyable, so we had a different crew chief and door gunner each time. So the other team leaders and all, I didn't get to know that well because they were on their mission. There was I was Diamond Head 1-0. We had a 2-0 and a 3-0 team, and so I didn't get to know the leaders of the Hawk Flyers anyway that well.
Question? Did you work closely with the South Vietnamese people? And if so, have you kept in touch with any of them? No.
I've heard they were there.
Yeah.
I paid for a dozen chickens one time that said we killed. with government money.
How much was it?
$5 a head. If we happened to shoot one of their water buffalo, that was $100.
Well, there's a really good story, mostly about ARVN infantry, and it was the Battle of Lam Song. It was well after I had left, and all of us, I think, but this was in 73.
70-71.
70-71.
Yeah.
But they took it pretty rough. They went into Cambodia, and the helicopter pilots shined again because they get shot down, another helicopter pick them up, take them back to base, they get in another helicopter, go back out, take more ARVN, get shot down, get carried back, do the same thing 3 or 4 times in a short period of time. So they really had it rough. I'm sure we lost a lot of helicopter pilots in that time frame. But our infantry had already moved out. All that was left was the flight, the air support. And of course, when that was pulled out, then the Vietnamese were pretty helpless. They did have a few really good units. They stood off the North Vietnamese in a couple of major battles. And they actually beat the North Vietnamese in 73. When we still had our Air Force, our air power over there, and the NBA were driving tanks, brand new tanks from China and Russia down. The talks in Paris were a joke. They just continued building the roads. They even were building fuel lines down into South Vietnam with no questions asked. So the NBA never quit. They would have, and they lied to their people. They told them that people weren't that many being killed, and it's a joke.
A question yet?
Was there anybody in your crew that was just that character that you could never forget? And is there a story that you can tell in public?
Well,
I'm guessing the telling public part's the hard part.
I had a gunner observer when I was flying scouts, and he was, I think he was hit once. He might have been hit twice. Anyway, it seemed like we flew a lot together as scouts, because you were assigned the aircraft, and then the gunner was also the mechanic. They changed that because it used to be they had a mechanic and they had somebody who was good with a machine gun, be their gunner. But then the maintenance on the helicopters deteriorated. So they put the guy that works on them, he's also your gunner. So anyway, we had a few scrapes as scout. And then when I moved to Huey's, then he was my crew chief on that Huey. We were assigned to Huey, so we flew that most every day. And so at any rate, we were somewhere where I I don't know when it was now, probably May. He was getting ready to rotate. He got his year there. And we got shot up, and he'd been working on the radios, which tube-type radios, and sand, and moisture, they don't work all that well. Anyway, he had been working on that, and he took the little box out, it's not like that big, and put it between the firewall on the Huey and his rear end, because we had to go. You know. So anyway, during the mission, we got shot up, and one of the rounds went up and hit that box. If he hadn't had it there, he had a bullet didn't work. So anyway, when we got back that day, he said, Mr. Rybolt, he said, I got 2-3 weeks left to go, and I'd like to go to ground maintenance only. Works for me. The question I had was, which was the helicopter you liked the best and why? Well, hands down, the best helicopter was the Huey, you know, with a turbine engine. But the one that I talk about to Ann, my wife of 56 years here, she knows all the war stories. And so we were in Germany, and I flew big old twin engine, radial engine, CH-37, Forerunner for all the big heavy lift helicopters. And anyway, that's the one I like the best, because you never knew what was going to go wrong. It had landing gear, retractable landing gear, which, you know, and these two big old radial engines from the Second World War is where they came from. Pratt & Whitney R2800 was into that. 2 banks of 9. Anyway, that's the one that I probably most interested in. But the Huey was by far the best.
Was that generally accepted by most pilots, that the Huey was the best?
I think so.
At the time.
I had air conditioning in a Cobra, and that was pretty stiff.
Air conditioning would be
that was.
Yeah. When I first got it, I wasn't supposed to get it, but it was a new one in the unit, and it was the first one in that part of Vietnam with an air conditioner. And the platoon leader decided that he was going to be his. And he was a new guy, but he was the platoon leader, and I said, well, thank goodness, you know how those new aircraft are. You can never count them. There's always something going on. And he decided it would be mine. So I was digging it, and I, flying back one day, making S-turns amongst the Hueys. They're bumping along 80 knots. I'm going 120 with the air conditioner on. And it's blowing up this cold air into the around my seat, went through the seat and everywhere. It was really great. But the inside of the window went opaque because the fog, it just fogged over, just like your car would, you know. All of a sudden, here I am amongst these Hueys, fogged over, and I couldn't see shit, you know. So I popped up and got away from it and everything, you know, and that was the last time I did that. I had the air conditioner on, I just didn't hang around the Hueys.
I like the Charlie model even Huey better than the others. And that was the hog that I was talking about, but it was a converted B model with a wider blade and rotor and an extra set of hydraulics because you couldn't fly it at all if you lost hydraulics. But it flew even nicer. It wouldn't hover much, but once I got it in the air and bled off some fuel, I really loved the way it handled. It's a lot of fun to fly it. And on the deck, like Phil was saying, a lot of low-level stuff.
Questions?
Back to one of the previous questions about the Vietnamese. I did insertions with the Vietnamese, Koreans, and American troops, different levels throughout the Victoria. Also, I hauled dollies, hot meals, and beer out to people out in the field.
Any other questions? Can you draw one more?
says, can you recall a situation that really tested your flying skill? Well, I got lit up, moved the tail rotor out, and I didn't know it until I was on fire, and I didn't know it until I got ready to land, because I was decelerating from the side of this hill. I knew I was on fire, and the guy on the told me over the radio, as if I didn't know. And I went ahead and decelerated into this rice paddy, and I don't get into torque and all that belonging to the helicopter, but if you're in this, with the power down, you don't know you don't have a tail rotor. It's just superfluous at that point. And I leveled the aircraft out and brought the power in, and it just went around, because then it needs a tail rotor. Well, that's when I found out I didn't have it. And I chopped the throttle. It made another 90-degree turn. We touched down. We were out of there. By the time they had struts on them that kind of collapsed. We touched like that, and by the time they collapsed, we were gone. I mean, it was out of that. So yeah, that might have been flying skill, but I think that's just reaction. That has nothing to do with skill.
Oh, I don't know.
Boy, I was on fire. I almost got out. And but I thought about it. Here I'm going 140 knots down the side of this hill. And I thought about just popping the safety belt and roll out the door. But I thought, man, if I survive, what are the guys going to say to Matt at the Oak Club? That I left those two guys on board the aircraft and bailed out. That's how shallow I was. Not anymore. But I was in those days. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess I just thought that was good training from the United States Army, I guess.
Yeah.
Figure out your own life.
Well, I only had one when a 51 caliber. The NVA had a 12.7 millimeter, which was a copy of our 50 caliber machine gun. And on that mission, where I got the Distinguished Flying Cross, what stopped me from continuing to hit them with rockets was I took a round through the rocket pod and then set 3 rocket motors on fire and exploded and tore out the wiring harness underneath and wounded my door gunner in the arm with some shrapnel. But then the motors were still burning in the pod, so I was kind of flying sideways with that thrust going on. And I had to get out of the village before I jettisoned the rocket pods, but I did that, dropped them out in a big old grassy area. So that was kind of different. And we had to use all vision. And when we were coming into the traffic pattern, because we had no radios, and I took my door gunner to the hospital pad, and the orderlies that were out there didn't want to come and get him because it was still smoking out of the sides. So, but he was okay. He walked up there anyway, and he was back on duty in 2 days.
Do we have time for more questions? Yes. How we doing?
We do a couple more.
Any questions? Yes.
Were you guys interested in flying before you enlisted?
Not really.
Well, I asked him when I went through the interview after I took the test. There were 3 majors, and I didn't know what a major was. Okay, 3 guys. I was one of the civilian quarters, and the guy said, "Why should the United States Army spend all this money to teach you to fly helicopters?" And I said, "I don't care about helicopters. You got any jets?" And he says, "You know, the Army doesn't need jets. It doesn't have jets, and we need helicopter pilots." And that was the answer.
Yes.
So, but the answer is no.
Aside from enemy gunfire, mechanically, what was the most typical mechanical problem that could take a Huey out?
You want to say that steering
Florida down a couple of times. I lost, there again, I was okay at airspeed. If you lose control of the tail rotor and you're doing like an H13, 60 knots, it can be a little 70 miles an hour, something like that. It'll streamline because you've got enough air going on the tail. But when you slow down, then it starts to get a turn. And so if you stop, you know, it'll spin until you crash if you don't take the appropriate action. So, anyway, we had been on a mission, and you know, I didn't know there was anything that wrong with it. And I was coming in, and when you reduce power, you need to add some pedal to keep it straight. And anyway, so it didn't react like it should have. So I tried it again, and I could tell it was turning on me. So I pushed one pedal, you know, and then nothing happened. I pushed a little farther. Pretty soon I pushed it all the way to go. Then I took the other pedal, pushed it all the way to go, and it didn't do anything. So we had to make a running landing. And so we were sliding in. The day before, I'd seen a Huey come in, and the pure steel planking you were talking about, it locks together to make a runway. And so apparently there was a piece that had popped up or something. And a Huey came in, he didn't have a tail rotor at all on the back of it. And he was coming in, and they touched down and slid down that pure steel planking. And they were coming pretty slow, and I thought, man, what a good job. And caught a skid, rolled over, burned, and nobody got out. So anyway, I didn't want to duplicate that. So I was sliding in on this gravel where we had some area there. Anyway, make a long story longer, I got too slow, and the thing turned around 180 degrees. And I dumped the nose to get airspeed again. Here I am looking at my wingman. He was following me in, of course. We were talking on the radio, he knew I had a problem. But he got out of the way, went out, got airspeed, came back in. I held more airspeed, slid it in, and that was that one.
Was that caused by a defective gearbox? What was it caused?
No, what it was there's a sleeve bearing back there. I didn't know what, at the time, you know, you don't know much about it. I didn't. But at any rate, there's a sleeve bearing in there, and it slides on the shaft. And that's what changes the pitch, the tail rotor. And that sleeve bearing is worn thin, and it crunched. The brass in it became an accordion and crunched around the shaft. And so they fixed it.
Well, I had one that I put in the category of a miracle because at the time it was the only case with the Huey that was survived for this incident. But I got this Charlie model Huey out of depot maintenance, which means they've done some major stuff to it. And as it turned out, when they drill out the squash plate, the bottom part of the squash plate, and re-tap it, they're supposed to put a bolt that's a millimeter bigger in diameter, and they didn't do that. It was a fairly common incident with the Huey, but I was flying at about 1,200 feet, and I just radioed the ground unit, and the nose pitched up, a stick hit me and my co-pilot in the stomach. And we both shoved with everything we had, but if you don't move the stick, you're not getting any hydraulic assistance. So I decided that that was it for us, and it was just going to roll over and go in. Well, about that time, I sensed a white light kind of thing behind me, and it freed up. So I got it into a glide, I had both hands on the cyclic and friction down the collective, and it was doing this, and where she could hear it hitting every revolution with that bolt that had sheared up and its head was hitting. Because the top part of the splash plate turned to the rotor, the bottom plate is just the one that control rocker it. So I got it about 10 feet off the ground, and it started to roll. I'd already picked this rice paddy, so I took one hand off the cyclic and pulled a little pitch and went for the next one. We slid all the way across it. Stopped in front of the dike on the far side of the rice paddy. They came out and got us and slow loaded the Charlie model back to the base. And so I went straight to the officers club and started drinking beer. A maintenance officer comes in and pulled a stool next to me, and he said, "You know, you're the first helicopter, first Huey with this incident to safely put it on the ground. And the only other crew that survived it crashed on top of the tree, and the crew climbed down the tree." So I had another beer. And that was the only time that I really was afraid. I had, on a couple of missions after that, I had the dry heaves a couple of times. Tried to hide it from the crew. But I got over it after a while. We just kept doing the mission. But I trusted the Huey from the get-go, and I knew that the enemy was the guy shooting at us, and that's how I was going to get it. But then when I started thinking, well, this machine can take us out too, so anyway.
Well, I think this will wrap it up. Is there anybody in the audience? I know we have a few Vietnam War veterans in here, and I would appreciate if you would stand up quickly. It would be great. And thank you to our panel of veterans here. I would encourage you, if you can, chat with them. If you have the book, they'll be delighted to sign it for you. So thank you very much.